Welcome to the Cult of the Clocktower. I am Andrew Nathenson. Every other week, a special guest and I have an in-depth discussion about a character from the game Blood on the Clocktower. Today's character is the Snake Charmer, a townsfolk from the Sects and Violets edition, whose ability reads, each night choose an alive player. A chosen demon swaps characters and alignments with you, and is then poisoned. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about the Snake Charmer, and joining me to talk about the Snake Charmer is a new guest. And this is James. Hey, James, how are you doing?
Hello. Good. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Since this is your first time on the show, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you played the game and stuff?
Sure. Most people who would know me listening to this would know me as Sarah Capelli from the unofficial server. I've been playing and running a lot of games there since March. I've been playing Clocktower itself for probably just over a year now. I had the pleasure of going to my first social deduction game convention with Decepticon back in February, and I was super excited, and then the quarantine happened. So
Yep.
A lot of my games have been online. I have very little experience playing and running games in real life in comparison, but I love the game and the community. It makes all the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about the Snake Charmer here, and we're actually going to add a little extra section. I got a request from somebody on the Reddit post that I made. Somebody asked if I could add something at the start of these Sects and Violets characters, just giving a little bit more info on how to actually run them in-game, in case the character description isn't enough.
Okay.
And I think that makes sense with these characters that can be a little bit more confusing and have some edge cases, so...
It's only Sects and Violets. It's as simple as it can be.
Yeah, exactly. So we're just going to go into a little bit more detail about how the Snake Charmer actually works mechanically to start with, and that'll make it that hopefully everything else makes sense even if you aren't as familiar with it. So let's get into that. So first of all, the exact thing that the Snake Charmer does is they choose someone every night, and if they choose the demon, or if they don't choose the demon, you just put them back to sleep. If they do choose the demon, you immediately tell them that they are that demon, so you use the UR plus the demon token, and then I would also remind them that they are evil by giving them a UR thumbs down. Then you put them to sleep, you wake up the X demon, and you notify them that they're now the Snake Charmer and that they're now good. You have to tell them both of those things, because if you just tell them that they're the Snake Charmer, they don't know that they are good, because it could be like a pit hag. Yeah. Yeah, you swap the tokens in the Grimoire, and just keep in mind that the Snake Charmer, the X demon, now Snake Charmer, is poisoned permanently. Permanently with an asterisk, because it's technically possible for them to be unpoisoned, but
yeah. We
more or less
don't need to get
poison
into that
permanently.
with Sects and Violets, thankfully.
Yeah. Well, I guess we do actually with Barista, but
Yeah,
we'll
that's a
talk
good
about
point.
that later.
Good point.
But more or less, they're poisoned permanently. You're still going to wake them every night, have them select somebody, but it never does anything. Some common misconceptions. When the Snake Charmer becomes the demon, you do not give them any info about the minions or anything else about the game. You just tell them they are the demon, they are evil, and you put them to sleep.
And you might wish them a hearty good luck, because odds are
Yeah.
they're going to need it.
Yeah. About drunken poison, there's kind of, I don't know, it's slightly like an open question at this point, but I think we can give some advice here, which is, can you tell the Snake Charmer that they've changed into the demon when they have not? At this point in time, the rules aren't completely clear on this, but I think the general consensus is, even if it is technically allowed, you really shouldn't do that, because generally speaking in the game, unless a character very specifically says to mislead somebody about what character or alignment they are,
Such as the
you're
way
not
the
allowed to do
recluse
that.
or the spy can be written.
Right, yeah, or the drunk lies to themselves about what they are. Yeah, it's just, it's a little bit unclear on that, but in any case, make sure your players know how you would run that, I guess.
Yeah,
I feel like it could be okay to lie to them about that as long as everyone's on board. But in general, you should probably not do that, just because players knowing what team they're on and knowing very specifically, like in the case of the Lunatic, they don't know what team they're on, but they know that the Lunatic's in the game, so that if they're the demon, they know that's a possibility.
Right.
With the Snake Charmer, it's they might not be thinking on that level most of the time.
And when you're talking about a complicated script like Sects and Violets, as the storyteller, it's usually strongly advised not to lie to your players. I think the only time I might possibly do it is I don't want my games to last a single day.
Mm-hmm.
And let's give the Snake Charmer a chance at something, but also know your
Right,
players
yeah.
well enough to know how they might respond to that.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about how to run it or mistakes people make or anything like that?
Not that I can think of. Running Snake Charmer itself is pretty straightforward. Not a lot of room for error on the Storyteller side. Snake Charmer picks someone. Is it a demon? Bingo. I think the only other thing that could be of note is if you're running a script with a Recluse in the game, how you could run that. But we can always talk about that later if we need to.
Yeah, I don't think we need to go over that right now. We're just going to focus on Sects and Violets. Yeah. All right, so now let's get into actually playing as the Snake Charmer, or any other general thoughts about Snake Charmer that don't pertain to how to run it. What do you think about the Snake Charmer? Why'd you choose to talk about this character?
Oh, the Snake Charmer is my very, very, very favorite role, and players who know me well would know that if I'm running a game, it's worth considering that I would put a Snake Charmer in, or at the very least the Philosopher, for the risk of a potential Snake Charmer. The reason I love the Snake Charmer so much is it does something that no other character in the game does, and it can flip a game on its head in an instant. The second the player wakes up and tells everybody, hey, listen, I have a story to tell you all. I was the demon. These were my minions. This is what demon I was. This is why I did the things I did and what I told to my demons and what they've told me and how we've been manipulating this game from the start. And now one of you all good players is the demon. Nothing else is going to make the evil team tell the truth, and nothing else is going to make a good player lie to their fellow good players the way a Snake Charmer threatens to do so.
Yeah, and it's also so interesting that you have a character that totally fits into the Townsfolk section, like in the sense that they give the good team a better chance to win, but they don't necessarily give the Snake Charmer player a better chance to win.
Yeah, it's a very, very strong double-edged sword here.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a super cool character, and it's pretty difficult to play, I would say.
That's another reason I love it. Clocktower is first and foremost a team-based game. No matter how you look at it, you are good or evil, and you have at least one person that you can work alongside with. When it comes to the Snake Charmer, you kind of need to either run on your own at that point and hope that the evil team kind of figures out that it's you, and then maybe they can help you, but that's also tough because if town is buying into the original demon's tale, they're going to be very suspicious of those minions as well.
Yeah, so, I think in general, the biggest thing I would say about playing as the Snake Charmer is that if you personally want to win the game, the best thing you can do is not choose the demon and confirm a few people as being not the demon. I feel like that is like the highest win rate strategy for the Snake Charmer.
Yeah, but are we playing to win, or are we playing to have fun?
Yeah, that is actually a really big consideration with the Snake Charmer. And obviously it changes based on the situation. Like there are certainly times when like turning into the demon would just confuse everybody so much that it gives you a really good chance of winning. But like from the start of the game, I think you start the game in a position where you are better off not turning into the demon over the course of the game.
Yeah, I have yet to see somebody hit the demon on the very first night and end up winning the game for evil.
I've done it once in a custom script myself.
Then you have hit a bucket list item that I am desperately trying to get to myself.
It was a very, very difficult situation. There was a lunatic and a Fangu. I became the Fangu and then hit the lunatic.
Nice.
Yeah, it was, but you're right. It is very difficult, especially on the night one, because it just gives the town so much information. They know exactly who the minions are right away.
Right, and I have a particularly poignant story of when I was hit by the Snake Charmer first night, which we can get into later when we talk about the demon, or bluffing or playing the Snake Charmer and hitting the demon. What does each side have to do at that point? So
what do you prefer to do on the first night then, with that in mind?
Oh, I always pick somebody else. Because I'm a numbers guy, and I will run the odds, say, all right, 11 players in the game, I've got a 10% chance of hitting the demon. If I'm playing with people in real life, I'm looking around at people's interactions, and there's one player whom I play with in real life, who I miss desperately, and I have not seen her in real life in a long time. But she and I have this meta of looking at each other closely when we look at our tokens for the first time. So if I get a read on her as possibly evil, I'm not going to pick her right away. I'm going to bide my time and see what happens. When it comes to online, I'll just run the numbers. What are the odds that this person is the demon? and then I kind of buddy up with that person for a while.
Yeah, I think that's you're less likely to hit the demon than not hit the demon on the first night, of course. But there's always the chance that you do. So I think a viable strategy is just to choose yourself. I don't do that either because it's less fun.
I know some players who objectively dislike Snake Charmer for the reason that it's so stressful to have to try to work on possibly playing two sides of the game, and they will pick themselves. Some players will pick themselves every time they dislike the demon that much. Or a Snake Charmer, I mean. They dislike playing Snake Charmer that much. And that's totally fine. Because if I come out and say, guys, I've been the Snake Charmer all game, picking myself, town, maybe they kill me. Maybe they think I've suddenly been Serenova's picked. That's the social part of the game, is would this player actually be doing that?
Yeah, so I think that of the nights, night one is the one where you should most often choose yourself, if that's what you want to do. Like if you're playing to win, I think the rest of the game, it's usually stronger to pick other players because you have some information to guide your decisions and you're more of like confirming what you think you already know. But yeah, I think that it's totally fine to pick yourself night one. It's also totally fine to not pick yourself on the first night. I should be careful saying night one because people still disagree on whether it's night one or night 0.
We can all agree it's still called the first night.
Yes, the first night.
But it's night one. That if we're being realistic.
I'm not sure where I land on this, so I won't weigh in.
You got to keep the fans happy.
Yeah. There's another strategy that I thought of while I was just thinking about the character and talking about it on the show, as far as what to do on night one.
Tell me.
I just said night one, so I guess we know where I land now.
Yes, good. All right, we can be friends now, Andrew. It's okay.
So the strategy that I thought of, and I've never tried this before, and it's like a really it's not a very concrete strategy. It's very wishy-washy. But this is to choose the player that you think that if they were the demon, it would be the least bad for you. So like the player who you think, if they swapped with me right now, it would be the least damaging to me. So maybe like a really new player, or maybe somebody who you've seen in this position before and they just like did not know what to do with the new information that they had. Because that way, even if you do end up swapping with them, theoretically it'll be the least bad for you.
That's a perfectly valid way to play it, and that's typically how I'll run it when I hit my mid-game Snake Charmer. So I have my early-game Snake Charmer, my mid-game Snake Charmer, and my late-game Snake Charmer. And early game, I'm just being like, okay, what is someone I trust or someone I really want to trust? And I might pick them while kind of concocting a little soft bluff for myself. Nothing that's going to be punishing to good, that good's going to rely on, okay, James is claiming Clockmaker 3, and that's really important. Because as soon as they're like, 3 doesn't make any sense, then I'm kind of forced to come out and say, hey, I'm the Snake Charmer, I was making all that up. At which point do they believe me and execute me anyway? Mid-game is kind of doing that more of, okay, if I have to pick someone, who do I think is most likely for me to kind of say, hey, that's real convenient that they brought this up right then and there. Like, what kind of fabrication can I make up? And then my late game is going to be very much how this game has gone. Have I been forced to come out and tell people that I'm the Snake Charmer and accept that these are the 3 or 4 or 5 people that I've checked, and you don't want a Snake Charmer in the final 3, and we'll talk about that more later, I'm sure. Or do I feel like, okay, I know who the demon is, and I'm just biding my time right now before I pick them?
So that's a strategy, and I think actually with regards to your mid-game strategy like that, you're often going to have a lot of information about people where, like, if somebody is already looking kind of sketchy, it can kind of be better to choose them a lot of the time, because either you're going to confirm them, at least as not the demon, and that's, like, helpful for figuring out what they are. But if they suddenly come out and say, hey, I got snake charmed, people are less likely to believe them. Yeah, although actually it really does seem in my experience that the Snake Charmer hits the demon quite often on the first night. I don't know how, but it just happens.
It's I don't know if you want to call it karma or just what's it called? If anything can go wrong, it will.
Yeah,
that law. I was just playing. Yeah. I was just running a game the other night, and there was one player who was consistently just getting evil, like all day. This player was getting evil. And I was like, oh, all right, guys, guess if you want to guess if this person's going to be evil again. Distributed the roles. Sure enough, they're Snake Charmer. And they're like, this is basically evil. I'm like, oh, well, good luck. Play it how you will. And they're like, all right, night one, it's definitely this person's the demon, so I'm going to pick this guy. And sure enough, the person they picked was the demon, which I was laughing really, really hard about.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the first thing to note about the Snake Charmer that people might not realize is that it's not really your goal to pick the demon necessarily.
Right.
It can be. Like the way I think most people will read the character at first and they're like, okay, so I'm trying to hit the demon for some reason, just because it seems like why would I be trying not to use my ability? But I think that is a misconception to some extent, where usually it's better for you personally if you don't.
I mean, I'm of the opinion where I like to play a little chaotic, but overall, I feel like you're a townsfolk, you're a good player. Overall, you should be trying to help the good team. You just need to be a little cautious about what can happen next. Because if you jump, obviously you don't want everybody to go, okay, well, I know Andrew is the Snake Charmer, or was, so it's either him or the demon who just outed themselves, so bing bang, that's the game.
Yeah, you get it down to a 50-50 right away in that situation.
Or you don't want evil to know that there's a Snake Charmer in the game, because then you give the minion a chance to come out and say, guys, I was the demon, and I was just Snake Charmed too. And if, your buddy who you've been talking to all game knows that you're the Snake Charmer, they're going to come out and say, hey, I know this player is the Snake Charmer.
So with those precautions in mind, how do you play as good in a way that helps your team?
So what I usually do is I'll keep quiet. The group I play with kind of has that meta of, if you want to claim to somebody, you say, okay, well, give me 4 roles, one of which you are. And I won't ask you, okay, well, what number did you get or anything like that. And you do the same for me and whatever. I, as a Snake Charmer, might tell them that one of those 4 roles is Snake Charmer, or I just might make up 4 things. So that down the line, when they come up to me and say, James, you can't be... I've heard claims from all 4 of these things. You can say, all right, I've had 3 nights of information to confirm who's not the demon, and 2 of them are still alive. That's pretty good. Now's a good time to say, hey, I'm the Snake Charmer. So, I mean, if you can confirm, 3 people, pretty much no matter what size game you're in, that's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, knowing anybody who is alive at the end to be not the demon is super useful.
Super useful.
Yeah, and with that in mind, actually, if you do choose people, it might be to your benefit to not tell anyone who you have chosen until the very end of the game. That way there's a chance that somebody that you know is not the demon is alive in the final 3. It's very similar to Fortune Teller.
Always comes with the caveat of, can I get good team to believe me?
Yeah, right. And I think also with that in mind, the Snake Charmer, I play very similarly to a Sage or a Ravenkeeper or Soldier, characters that want to be attacked at night. And this isn't something that I've heard many other people talk about that much, but this is how I personally like to play the Snake Charmer, is I'm trying to get myself killed at night, because once I'm dead, I'm a lot more trusted, and once I'm a dead Snake Charmer, it makes it so that it eliminates a lot of those plays like you were talking about where the minions claim to have been hit by the Snake Charmer, or the demon does.
Right.
And it just makes your info a lot more trusted, and you have some very powerful information.
And that actually makes me think of how great of a bluff that is for evil. You give that Snake Charmer to a minion and you're the Vigor Mortis and they die? That's useful too.
Yeah, that's super good, actually. I hadn't thought of that.
Lots of different ways. I mean, again, we're coming across so many different ways you can play this character, which is why it is my favorite character. Like the list of possibilities doesn't end. And you could argue this for many characters in the whole Clocktower, and specifically Sects and Violets. But again, the Snake Charmer is just so unique in the way it goes about accomplishing its goal.
So do you come out publicly after a certain point? Like, will you say
if I'm cornered, I try to keep it quiet as long as I can.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you think there's any merit to the idea of maybe you get 3 nights of info, you haven't hit the demon, you just come out and say, hey, I'm the Snake Charmer, I'm going to be choosing myself from now on, or do you think that is too dangerous because of opening up the situation where you don't know if it's you or the demon in the end?
I think if I am just very certain I can't pull off an evil win, or if I feel like good needs the help, if I hold the key to good winning, I'm not going to keep that to myself, because even if I do jump, if I'm exactly right, and the original demon is dead by final 3, like there's still a good way to track information. It's hard. I'm a storyteller at heart first and foremost, so I want to make sure that people are enjoying the game and having fun. So yeah, there's absolutely merit to saying, hey, I'm gonna pick myself from now on. The question is though, will people believe me? And the people who know me well enough will say, absolutely not. I'm not going to believe you as far as I can throw you, man. So if I'm going to come out publicly, I'm going to say, guys, I'm the Snake Charmer. Nobody else seems to have a good person to execute today. These are the people I have checked. Kill me now so that evil no longer has the chance to say that they were Snake Charmed as a way to weasel out of it at the very end.
Yeah, it's similar to playing an outsider in a game where you know it's a Fangu. Where at some point you can like come out and say, look, I'm the outsider, therefore it's a Fangu, but just kill me now. So yeah, I think if you can get the group to trust you, then, well, it's an awkward situation, because if they trust that you are choosing yourself, then suddenly the optimal strategy is to not choose yourself.
Both sides of that coin I have seen firsthand. Going into the final 3, 4 people are alive and they're voting not to execute that day. They're pretty sure they know who it is, but it's still a toss-up. And they're saying, well, do we trust the Snake Charmer not to jump? And someone says, oh, yeah, no, they've been straight-laced all game with me. They wouldn't do that. And the guy's like, no, I promise you guys, I'm not even taking a risk. I'm picking myself. That player jumped to the demon that night, and no one believed the demon. Everyone trusted. You get a reputation after that. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, that's true.
Fun reputation, though. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, so I guess that's sort of the problem with coming out and then hoping that people will trust you. So I think that in general, you have to, like, the safer thing to do is not claim Snake Charmer until you're dead.
Or accept and say that you're willing to be executed. Fall on your sword, yeah. Or come out after the fact is always good.
Snake Charmer is not the worst character to be executed anytime that you just need to execute somebody. Especially you can end up in a situation where you've been like sort of bluffing all game just in case you turn into the demon. And so people are going to be suspicious of you anyway, so you can just be like, okay, just kill me and get it over with, so we don't have to talk about this later.
I usually find myself picking the person who I'm sure is not the demon and jumping over to them at that point. And the look or the messages I get from the storyteller when I jump is always that kind of resigned. And I'm like, oh no, this is not good. I don't know if I can pull this off, and I make it to final 3, and no, they find me every time.
Yeah. We've been talking all this time about playing the Snake Charmer as a Snake Charmer, but we haven't talked about what you do after you do swap. You might be trying to avoid it, but it's going to happen from time to time. So what do you think you do as the new demon? Like, do you have a general strategy? Do you just give up? No.
Well, if you're a religious person, I recommend you start praying. Because you are now fighting an uphill battle unless you have found yourself in the final 3 or 4.
Yeah, if it's late enough in the game, then
if you can coin flip it. I mean, if you found yourself with like the perfect bluff with great information and people trust you, you're in a good spot. The hard part is the ball is not in your court at this point. The ball is in the court of the original demon, and how convincing can they be? And if you're trying to butt in and tell everybody how unlikely it is, it doesn't look too good for your credibility.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point, that you have to kind of, like, pushing back against the idea that there has been a Snake Charmer swap at all is usually going to land more suspicion on you than being amenable to the possibility and at least exploring it a bit with the other players, so that it's like everyone's trying to find out at the same time, like, oh, did this actually happen?
Mm-hmm. And it's tough because, like, unless you're in good, like really deep in a circle of trust with people and you know a lot of the information, it's hard to fabricate it. Because what comes next is you're playing as the demon, having no information. Just a reminder, you're not getting any bluffs. You don't learn who the minions are. You have only the information of what's happened. If you've been following the person who you just picked as the demon and their whispers, maybe you can find out who the minions are. But then it's very contingent on what demon it is, which is the point of any script, really. I feel like the scripts are kind of centered around the evil team, and With the demons, it's all about the way that misinformation and incorrect information has been spread about, and how do you continue with that facade?
Yeah, so you've suddenly become one of those 4 demons.
Which means the power's in your hands. You now have a key piece of the puzzle, and you have until the night ends to try to think of what you can do with that.
Right. Do you do different things, like based on which demon you get turned into? Or
Oh, if I'm the Fangu, I'm probably looking for an outsider almost immediately.
Yeah, I would do the same thing, because
at that point you're basically creating a second evil team where only the 2 of you know the truth, and I might not even go talk to them. I might just back them up, or if I can catch their eye and just give them a wink or something to kind of clue them in, because otherwise, outsiders don't have to find any misinformation. They just have to be trusted as not being jumped to, and again, you're just boiling that down to the odds.
Yeah, and unfortunately in that situation, the former Fangu is going to know that you have the ability to jump to an outsider. So that complicates things a lot. That's actually one of the big problems with it, is that the former demon can explain every other piece of information that has ever happened in the game, other than what you have said, pretty much.
Yeah.
So they can be like, yeah, okay, the Savant got these 2 pieces of information because they're next to the Nodashi, and this other person got this because that, and this person's lying because they're a minion, and they can just lay it all out there, and it's relatively easy to check that they're telling the truth, or at least it can be relatively easy. It's not always.
The longer the game has gone, the more detailed and complicated the story becomes. Say, oh, I know you were witch this night, and you were pit hag that night, and you were mad this day, and you told this to my minion because they told me that. That's when it becomes okay, there's no way that this is made up.
Although it still could be a bluff. Like, they could be telling all of the true things and just have not swapped.
Always possible.
But yeah, so that's like the big problem, is that they know exactly what you're doing, and it's like there's no mystery anymore about what type of demon it is.
Right. So I would always try to caution the minions to trust your fellow minions first before you trust your demon. That's hard, because your team needs to work together, and are you going to not trust each other, the smaller team, because the threat of it? It's it's tough.
Yeah, it can be definitely a good idea, though, to, as a minion in a game, just talk to the other minions and make plans with them. But you don't have to tell the demon everything, so that they don't have that information they can use against you later. That could go even as far as not telling the demon what type of minion you are. But that obviously depends on the situation. Sometimes you'll need to do that in order to make certain plays. But yeah, so I think that's a good point, that you don't always have to keep the demon in the loop, because they might not always be on your team.
And you just tell them to trust you. Just trust me, I'm your minion, I got this. And they're going to say, okay. And they're going to leave that whisper saying, I'm playing Sects and Violets, right? There's no lunatic in this script. It can become quite confusing. And again, that's another thing I like. I mean, I haven't ever seen that happen, where the minions weren't trustful of the demon just because we're in a game with the snake charmer. Yeah. You kind of hope that, okay, maybe, what are the odds that there's a snake charmer? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I have had a game where the minions killed the new demon after a snake charm swap, where the pit hag turned them into something else and just won the game for good on the spot.
Yep.
That is something to keep in mind with related to snake charmer, is that if you're a pit hag, try to choose people and change them that you think are not the snake charmer.
And as I was getting ready for talking about this, I was thinking how I've never seen that happen. Not only have I seen that happen just within the last 5 days, I had that happen in a game that I was playing in. I also was just in a custom game that has the Bone Collector, which is a traveler that lets a dead player use their ability one more time, and I let the Snake Charmer go, and the demon had, found out that there was a Snake Charmer or something, and had come up to me and said, well, I'm the Undertaker. Have them pick me just so I'm cleared, because I would like to be trusted this game. And this is a player who is known for their evil plays. Case in point. The Snake Charmer picked the Undertaker, and then became the demon, was dead, and the game ended on the second night.
That's amazing.
Oh, Jack, you son of a gun.
that's that's such a good play.
It was. It was brilliant. And I came up. I thought about like that person might be a minion who's trying. We were playing custom scripts, so I thought maybe they would be the spy. And then because set in as the Undertaker, that's great. But nope, I got played for a fool, and I don't regret it at all because that's going to be a memory.
That would be a great way to win as an evil bone collector.
That. Well, I guess no, because the demon's dead, so you would have lost.
Oh yeah, wait. I guess as a good
one, yeah. So I technically won, and it was great because it's like I
so you actually did win in that situation.
Yeah, I picked the Snake Charmer only because I had to leave the game, and I was like, guys, I only have an hour. I'd like to play, and sure enough, I got to stay to the end and was pivotal in ending it.
Nice.
Oh, Snake Charmer's great.
All right, so basically, I guess the too long didn't listen TLDL on playing as the new demon after you've jumped is do your best and know that it's kind of stacked against you most of the time.
Yeah, the hardest part is if you don't have a bluff yet. That's the point at which everyone's going to be going around and say, okay, what are you? What's your claim? What do you want to be?
Yeah, it's going to be hard to come up with something realistic sounding.
So
which is kind of why you need a bluff from the start.
Kind of go in. Like I played in a game where I made it to Final 3 the other day, and I was able to claim artist, and I figured no one else had been artist. But then I ended up implicating myself with my own artist question that I then went and asked. So what are you going to do?
There is something where we can probably give some more actionable advice, though, which is playing as the old demon who is now a snake charmer, now a poisoned snake charmer. And I think there's actually a few interesting strategies here. For instance, you could totally just come out on day, like right away, right after you've been swapped, and say, tell everything that happened, lay out everything you know about the game. You can also keep it quiet and tell people in private. That way the minions don't know that they're not on your side anymore. You can also just keep it to yourself indefinitely and hope that the minions will eventually kill the demon or something. There's a lot of things you can do, and they all have their merits.
I told you earlier I had a story about being snake charmed the first night and becoming the good snake charmer. Is that obviously only one person in the game knows that just happened, which is the new demon. I went into a whisper with all my minions and said, guys, here's the bluffs. Figure out what you want to do so that we never have to talk to each other again the whole game. Tell me what you all are. And they were a little suspicious at first, but they all, it's the demon. Why would I not trust my demon? And I then went into private whispers with people and was like, guys, I was the demon. I've been snake charmed. These are the bluffs. These are the players who are the minions. Now, don't, go tell like maybe one other person because I don't know who the snake charmer is. I don't want them to know who who the minions are. And we just started systematically executing my minions one at a time and watching them all turn on themselves or try to clear me. I felt like a puppeteer with, just the maniacal laugh in the back of my mind.
Yeah, actually, like, if it happens on the first night, the minions don't know the bluffs yet. You can totally just make up bogus bluffs to give them so that it's like, when you eventually tell everyone, like, hey, guess what, they're the minions, they'll be like, okay, that's why those people have been double claiming with everyone.
Right. And, and they, my minions did something that I've seen people start doing, or didn't do something I've seen people start doing more and more and more, which is, if you are a minion and your demon starts outing you, don't accept your fate. Fight. Yeah. Claw at whatever possible scraps of trust you can hold on to. Because what you ideally want is to try to give your new demon, whoever they may be, a fighting chance. And that means you doing whatever you can. If you're the Serenovus, keep picking the same person that you've been picking every single day, so that good doesn't have whatever possible piece of information they have. And if you're possibly picking your new demon, that gives them more credibility to think up of a bluff. I was mad about being the artist all game, and that's why my artist question didn't match up with what this person, this snake charmer now is saying was the demon, and you just got to kind of roll with it.
Like the very least you can do, I think, is get that snake charmer executed, former demon. As long as you can tell whether or not, like, maybe they're just bluffing and you're just going to get your demon killed, but probably not. If you can tell that they've actually been swapped, then at the very least try to get them executed before they execute you, because that way you have another night to use your power and you waste an execution.
Exactly. It becomes a race against time And how many executions is town willing to put in as these potential minions? Because how deep of a bluff are you worried about? Is this a minion bluffing it? Well, I guess I might be getting a little ahead of myself when we talk about that.
Yes, that is the next section. Any other thoughts on playing as the old demon, who is now a snake charmer?
If you ask me that question every chance we get, I will make this a 2 or 3 hour long episode. I have plenty of thoughts, but I think we've covered everything, all the bases. Everything we need to talk about has been talked about.
All right. Let's talk about bluffing as the snake charmer. Usually we do this as good and evil, so let's start with, as if you're a good player, what are situations where you would bluff that you are the snake charmer?
You want to live. You're a savant. You want to claim to be the snake charmer. Evil's probably not going to kill you. Now, and it's a great pigeonhole to put the demon in. They say, I've heard there's a snake charmer in the game. I'm going to go with this bluff and say, hey, I've been snake charmed. And you can say, there's no snake charmer in the game. I made that up. Oh, now who's got egg on their face? The demon. That's who.
I think that the interesting thing here is that the snake charmer bluff will make you less likely to be killed at night, but like we were saying, it makes you pretty likely to be killed during the day. So
again, there's times you can do it. Like a good, I think a savant is great. You want to get at least 2 or 3 days of information worth. If you have a vortex in the game, you get 2 false pieces of information. 6 false pieces of info can be extremely useful once you figure out the demon. And again, it's all a matter of how convincing can you be. I wouldn't necessarily be going into it as as a seamstress, trying to make people think I'm the snake charmer. And and I feel like, just like kind of what I said before, trying to make evil think that there's a snake charmer in the game, so that they can come out and say, hey, I've been snake charmed, and you can say, no, I haven't, and I have all this information that I really did have to help back me up.
There is a little danger with that, though, where maybe you're bluffing as snake charmer, but there actually is a snake charmer in the game who hasn't said anything. And then you don't really know. It's like, oh, is the demon claiming that they've been snake charmed because they thought that I was the snake charmer, or because they actually have been by somebody else, and now suddenly you're the most suspicious person, and everyone's just very confused.
Well, and hopefully we have the time to execute both myself and the demon.
Yeah.
Original demon.
Yeah. I think that if you are like a savant or artist or something, and you have info about whether or not there's another snake charmer out there, like I could imagine one of your savant information pieces being like, there is a snake charmer in play, and then you somehow determine that that's false.
And having a buddy, and I'd say this no matter what, when you're formulating, creating some sort of bluff is good, is to have a buddy who knows the truth and can back you up, say, oh no, they claimed this to me on day 1 or 2 that they were going to be doing this, so this tracks. There's no way they would know on day 5 they're hitting the demon.
And then something we sort of hinted at is that bluff swapping with the snake charmer. Well, I guess we didn't really hint at this specifically, but I'd said that I think I play it like the Raven Keeper Soldier or Sage. And I actually think that bluff swapping with the snake charmer can be a really good play, where you have the person who you want to protect and keep alive, and they pretend to be the snake charmer. And then you have the snake charmer who you actually want to die, and they pretend to be the savant or whatever. And so when you do that swap, you're obviously making it so that the prioritization for the demon is switched. And so, yeah, it's a bluff swap character that I don't think everyone always thinks of, but that is good to keep in mind.
And I gotta say, I've never really thought about bluff swapping, or just swapping claims with someone who was a snake charmer until you brought it up. That's a really great point. You let the snake charmer, or you let the dreamer, get in cahoots with the snake charmer somehow.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a really powerful combination, because the dreamer can say, hey, I saw this person as a potential demon. Make sure you're not checking them. And Snake Charmer's like, okay, yeah, I'll pick somebody else. Tell me someone who you saw as a minion and their information seems a little weird. You can start working together to clear, okay, they're the minion at worst. Do I really care that much about a witch with 5 people alive?
Yeah.
No, not really.
Yeah, for sure. The snake charmer kind of has to be the one to initiate that, because the snake, like...
Well, unless the dreamer picked the snake charmer.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. If you talk to somebody and you're like, I saw you as the snake charmer or this minion, and then they're like, okay, yeah, fine, I'll come out to you and tell you I'm the snake charmer, then perfect time to set this up.
And I feel like that would be a great game for the snake charmer to just pick themselves every night, because just the sheer power of having 2 confirmed good players trusting each other to try to start solving the game, and that no one's trying to manipulate the other, that's really strong.
Yeah. All right, so that's bluffing as the Snake Charmer as a good player. What about as an evil player? It's probably more commonly done. Yeah, I think to start, it's super chaotic because now you're not just dealing with a character that actually swaps with people, you're dealing with the possibility of it. So bluffing as the Snake Charmer as evil is very chaotic. It's kind of hard to predict how it's going to go. If you are a demon and you're bluffing as the Snake Charmer, then you just have to know that you're going to have to be constantly defending yourself from the perspective of you as the Snake Charmer, and it can put you in a very dangerous position where, and this is not even talking about bluffing that the swap has happened, but just like bluffing that you are a Snake Charmer from the start of the game. I think it's fairly dangerous to do as the demon because people might execute you because they think you're the demon, or they might execute you because you're the Snake Charmer, and you have to spend all game now fighting against people to not do either of those things.
Once again, you're a one-man team.
So in general, I would avoid it. I mean, obviously there's exceptions to everything, but I would avoid it just as like a straight-up demon bluff from the start.
Fangu is probably a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good point. That actually could work out very well if you manage to make a swap and then claim that you can clear them. For the minions, though, it has a lot of obvious upsides, I think. It makes it so that now there's another potential demon target, which is actually good if you're a minion. And it gives you credibility to your demon being able to get out of trouble later, claiming to have had that swap happen. Like if you've hinted to someone early on that you're a Snake Charmer as a minion, that's opening up the possibility for your demon to use that escape hatch. And if you can be believed that you've made the swap happen, then obviously that's just a very strong situation, and it can just completely throw out all of Town's info out the window.
Which is always what you kind of want to do. Make Town start over, trying to solve Sects and Violets. You'll be loved.
Yeah. Do you have any other thoughts on bluffing it as evil? I've asked you that question again, but you haven't said much yet on this topic, so I feel like...
I feel like I've been talking so much. I want to make sure the host gets a word in, I guess. Bluffing as evil is risky. Like you said, I wouldn't do it as a demon unless I was confident that I could make something else happen. I feel like what I might do is if I start bluffing as, say, I don't know, we'll say like a clockmaker or something, and they say, well, why didn't you come out with that? Your information doesn't make much sense. At which point you can say, all right, I'm the Snake Charmer. I didn't want to get pinged. And if they say, oh, well, now we want to execute you, you say, well, that's a terrible idea. And they say, why? And you say, I don't know. And you say, oh, I could still be useful. Like, let me get at least one more night's of information. And they say, okay. And then the next day, you're not willing to be executed. They say, you said you'd be willing to execute. I never said that. Well, now the focus is on you. And you say, my clockmaker info is what I've been playing all game. There's lots of ways you can do with it. How deep are you willing to lie and try to make someone else look good? And every person in group is going to have a different meta for that. It's a gamble. It's one of the harder things to bluff as for evil, if you ask me. But yeah, if you can do it well, everything about the Snake Charmer just comes off as high risk, moderate reward. When it pays off, it's pretty good. Not great. But when it doesn't pay off, you're like, yeah, I should have seen that coming.
You know what you're getting into. All right, so we already mentioned some of the stuff from Section 3 at the start. We've kind of front-loaded some of this with the new Section 0. But running the Snake Charmer as the Storyteller. This is now where we can go into less of how to run it and more of like stylistic choices and things that aren't explicitly how to run it, but things to be careful of and avoid, or things you like to do. So I think to start here, typically we said that the Snake Charmer is poisoned all game once they've made the swap. So the new Snake Charmer is poisoned forever. The only way to make that not happen is the barista, I think. Is that correct? Is there any other way?
There is one other way with the amnesiac.
Oh, okay.
If the amnesiac's ability is make somebody no longer drunk or poisoned.
That's a good point. Amnesiac, I guess the answer to any question.
You can always pull down to amnesiac.
Yeah, amnesiac's the loophole to everything. Fortunately, though, that's not in Sects and Violets, so we don't need to worry about that. Whenever this show gets to the point where we're talking about the amnesiac.
Down the line, we'll get there.
That's going to be a long episode.
For anybody who doesn't know, it's a role that can do literally anything the storyteller wants it to do.
Yeah. but they don't know what it is.
All right,
And
they
have
got to figure it out as
throughout
the game evolves. It's cool.
It is a very fun role. But yeah, so Barista is the only way, without giving the Amnesiac a weird ability, the Barista is the only way to allow the former demon to use their Snake Charmer ability. And personally, I actually quite enjoy doing that because what's more fun than having one Snake Charmer swap in a game? Having two Snake Charmer swaps. So,
which is actually not the only way that can happen. But we'll get that in just a second.
Right. Yes. Yeah, so I guess, throw in a bone collector or whatever, and now you can have like 3 or 4.
You're just giving me so many ideas for my own custom script.
But yeah, so in general, I think it's pretty fun to use the Barista to make it so that the new Snake Charmer is no longer drunk or poisoned.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it also gives them a really unique opportunity.
Yes, because who's gonna believe? Oh, guys, the Barista triggered on the person that was telling you all they're the demon. They're the demon again. And
yeah, I was the Snake Charmer who hit them originally, but now I've been Snake Charmer
now
back.
I'm good.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a fun thing to do.
I would be very careful doing that as a storyteller. The reason why I can't see that ever going well for the original Snake Charmer is because who lets a Barista live that long into a game? At the point where it's really going on to be at worst the final 5. But when it's final 5, you just execute the 2 and the game's over.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you still have a Cerenovus alive. I had a Cerenovus jump on a gun, believing I was the new demon correctly, and getting me out of a sticky spot and getting me in the final 3.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting situation, but at least I like that it gives the former demon like an actual ability to use, because you're waking them up every night. And now to suddenly have that mean something, and they're like, okay, I have new like, most likely they're not going to choose the old demon, and they're just going to be able to confirm that somebody isn't the demon. And I like that suddenly they can have actual info to give.
And they can still have some information added into the game. Not necessarily by their own interactions, but with a savant or artist, they can still absolutely get info on the poison Snake Charmer.
Ooh.
Savant, I've told Savant, hey, the Snake Charmer picked themselves last night. And it's just a drunk Snake Charmer who's like, there's no point why you're waking me up. I'm still going to keep you part of this game. Or if you're going out and telling people, hey, I'm the Snake Charmer, the demon is a Nodashi, and the artist goes up to the storyteller and says, hey, is so-and-so the Snake Charmer that picked this person last night? I mean, you can say that's equivalent to, asking the storyteller, am I the artist? But it adds a layer of interaction that is a unique scenario. So I like trying to keep my players involved in games as much as possible.
Yeah, I really like the idea of giving the savant information about the person that the Snake Charmer pointed to. So you could say, like, the player that the Snake Charmer chose last night is a outsider or whatever. That way, sure, they don't do anything for themselves, but pointing to somebody still has a semantic meaning in the game.
And that's another thing, is you could say 2 people chose this player last night.
Ooh, yeah, I like that too.
So even if the Snake Charmer is picking themselves because they say there's no point, if somebody else chose them the night before as the witch or something like that, very possible to keep them in the game.
It is worth noting here that the poison Snake Charmer doesn't register to the mathematician. It would be kind of cool if it did.
Oh,
but
that's true, because they're gonna be drunk due to their own ability, not another's ability. Oh, yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah, that's something that is a very strange edge case, and you really have to look at the wording in the mathematician. It's like, yeah, this is about players whose abilities work abnormally due to another player's ability. And the Snake Charmer works abnormally due to its own ability. So even if they choose the demon, while that is their ability working abnormally because they're poisoned from themselves, so it doesn't register to the mathematician.
Mm-hmm. I'd never thought about that before. I love getting those little interactions and those little things. And that's like when you're a storyteller for Sects and Violets, those are those little things that you just need to be on top of. And if a player comes up and says, hey, how would you run this? Would you include this? You have to tell them that's not how you would run it without admitting to having done that and keeping a straight face. So even the storyteller needs to bluff in Sects and Violets sometimes.
Yeah, you kind of have to be able to know the nuances of the characters enough to give an answer on the spot of how you would interpret it. And you have to do it confidently, otherwise they'll know that, oh, you didn't actually run into this situation. Let's talk about the thing you alluded to earlier, which is the other way for two Snake Charmer swaps to happen in a game, which is the Philosopher. So the Philosopher turns themselves into a Snake Charmer, then they successfully hit the Demon. A couple interesting things. The Demon doesn't become a Snake Charmer; they become a Philosopher. At least with the.
Are we gonna get into that? The whole which iteration of Philosopher are we talking about?
Yeah, I think on this show we're going to talk about the new Philosopher.
That makes sense. I feel like by the time your run through Sects and Violets is over, we'll be at that point.
Yeah, and if the Philosopher changes, we'll make a errata episode or something.
We'll do Snake Charmer Point 2.
Yeah, but it's for anyone who doesn't know, there's changes in the works for Philosopher. That it's mostly the same. But anyway, the long and short of this interaction is that, say the Snake Charmer hits the Demon, so they're now the Demon. Then the Philosopher turns into Snake Charmer, and then they hit the new Demon. In that situation, of those three players, the one who is currently the Demon at the end of it is not poisoned, and the other two are either drunk or poisoned. Because of what we were saying earlier, where the Snake Charmer poisons themselves. It's kind of complicated, but that's basically what you need to know, is that at the end of that, the Demon is sober and healthy. The others are drunk or poisoned in some effect.
And I was just thinking, how brilliant is it if you're the Philosopher with a barista in the game, if you could realize, hey, the Storyteller could make the original Demon sober, then I become the Snake Charmer and jump to somebody else. If I think of that, I'm going to go to the Storyteller and say, please, let's see where this can go. And we'll see what happens after that. That's so fascinating. Sects and Violets is just wild, and there's so many little asterisks you can tick on to almost every character for how it can be run, and what you can add in, and how things can subvert the way you typically might see the game played, decisions storytellers or players can make, and just what they can do from it. And it's just so fascinating. It's why it's my favorite script.
Yeah, it's super fun.
I don't think I've ever seen a game of Sects and Violets go to completion, and very rarely have I had players say, nope, I've solved this game, I know how everything happened, and have it right.
Exactly. And I think the Snake Charmer is actually a fairly big part of that. It opens up a lot of new possibilities. Any closing thoughts on anything we didn't get to?
I'm thinking as you're going through Sects and Violets, it's possible you could add a section 4, which is, where does the pit hag come into all this? I feel like
that's just the pit hag episode.
Oh, yeah.
That's just like the 5-hour-long pit hag episode that will happen.
There's so many interesting interactions with a pit hag and a Snake Charmer, which is, if you have a Snake Charmer, like if you're the pit hag, you never got the chance to talk to your demon, and you try to turn yourself into the Snake Charmer, and nothing happens. That tells you there's a Snake Charmer in the game, which is good, because then at that point it's what we were talking about earlier, which is when would the minions not necessarily want to come out to their demon. That would be an instance where you might want to be a little reserved, and you might even say, hey, I'm not going to tell you everything, because, well, what if there's a Snake Charmer in the game? Or if someone tells you there's a Snake Charmer and you feel like you're going to lose, do you say, hey, that's the demon over there, hoping that the Snake Charmer is going to turn on good team? I mean, you probably shouldn't, but if you did.
Yeah.
And then the most interesting thing I think I've ever seen a pit hag do is successfully turn themselves into the Snake Charmer, knowing that their demon is gaining a little bit of pressure, and then choosing their demon. So the demon can say, I've been Snake Charm jumped to, not be lying about it. Artists and Savant can get information based on that, and your minion has successfully pulled the demon mantle away from you, but you're still evil.
Yeah, and at the very least, that's just like another way for the demon to change places. We actually the episode's not out yet. It's coming out tomorrow as of when we're recording this, but we actually talked about that a little bit on the Barber episode.
Awesome.
Like swapping a minion into being the snake charmer. But yeah, I do feel like that's more of a topic for the Pit Hag episode, which will be a very long episode.
I'm sure that'll be
a lot of edge cases.
that'll be a good one. That's an episode you could really sink your teeth into.
Yeah, when I was adding stuff to the show notes for this one, I was also thinking about like, oh, what about like the evil twin, making an evil twin snake charmer? But then I decided to save that for the evil twin episode as well. So, so if there's something like that, listener, that you think we didn't get to, it's probably going to be covered in the episode for the character that causes that specific effect.
Just you wait.
All right. With that, thanks everyone for listening, and thank you, James, for being on the show.
My absolute pleasure.
All right. You'll hear from me and another guest in a couple weeks.